You have less Microsoft code, therefore you're going to have less patches that you have to deal with on that system. You do not face it. What happens whenever you have to install a patch on an operating system that is running, say, 36 virtual machines?
Reboot.
And that patch happens to force a reboot. Well, what happens to those 36 machines that are also on it? They go down. Well, they don't necessarily get rebooted because they can save state, and they can only be down as long as the host reboots. So you don't have to like reboot the host and then reboot all the guest machines too. So it's not that bad. But really, the right way to do this, and I can tell you from experience, the way to do this, whenever that happens, or say you want to change the hardware or add memory or do the things that you want to do on that physical host, you got to move the VM. Now you can do the live migration. I think we might have a little bit on that later. You can live migrate them to some other machine so that you have nothing on this machine. Now do your patches, do your reboot, do whatever you got to do, and then live migrate them back. Now live migration is a live migration. What does that mean? I don't think I have a slide on, so I'm going to talk about it here since it came up. Whenever you're doing a live migration, if I could have a user that's logged in from their workstation into the server and taking a file that's on a guest machine, okay, and they're copying it down from their guest machine to their local workstation, just doing a file copy. You guys know how sensitive file copy is. If you lose your network connection for a minute, for a second, you're done, right? You can live migrate that machine from one location to another physical server, and that user's file copy would never stop, would never get interrupted. That's what live migration means. Okay. Now it's beyond the scope of this discussion to talk about how that happens, but if we have time and you want to talk about that, I can certainly do that at the end of if we have some time left over at the end of this presentation. You got a question?
What about an access database?
Same thing. It's not going to know the difference. Now, in full disclosure, I'll tell you, if that guest is pinging the server, you might miss a response in the middle of that. Okay?
I test that.
That's so instantaneous, okay? Because you're talking milliseconds there. You're probably going to hit that.
I tested. I had only 2.
Yeah, you lost 2 whenever you did a test ping while you're doing live migration. It is that fast. But that kind of really, really, really fast millisecond types of downtime, your protocol, your networking protocol is going to be able to catch that. That's the error correction, right? It's going to be caught by your standard error correction. So you're not going to lose your connectivity to that device. It's going to be so instantaneous that you're not going to see it. And you know what? All the virtualization platforms that have live, well, I guess there's only a couple. Those that have live migration, they have the same result. They lose the connection for milliseconds, and then it's back, and all is hunky dory. Okay. Less third-party code. You don't want to install other workloads on here. Not only do you not want to do Microsoft patches, but you don't want to do everybody else's patches either. It goes down to keep it thin. Remember, we're talking about the parent. Keep the parent for Hyper-V only. Don't install it. We talked about that. I guess I went out of order here. Don't install third-party programs. Don't browse the web. This goes back to don't use it as a workstation. Okay. If you need to download a hotfix and it happens to be for the parent, well, so what? Download it from your workstation, copy it over the network. Right? You don't need to have web access on that. All you're doing, remember, the topic of this discussion is how to keep your Hyper-V secure. It's naturally a secure platform. The one caveat that I have to always go back to is your trusted computing base. The parent is trusted by the hypervisor. That becomes your weak link. If you do this stuff and you get infected, you're not secure anymore. Okay? So take care of the parent.
Potentially so are your child partitions now.
That's right, because you have that trust relationship. Absolutely. What he was saying is potentially, if you get your parent infected or is vulnerable, then all of your guests on that machine are also vulnerable because of the trust relationship. So the parent is very, very special, and you have to treat it special. What about antivirus? Antivirus is good, right? Who thinks antivirus is not good?
I hate it.
Okay, a couple people hate it. I'll give you that. Especially on a server, because what does it do to your server? Slows it way down, right? So let me ask you something. Antivirus is good, though. Who thinks antivirus is good on a server? Protects you, right? Gives you that added layer of protection. Yeah.
Most
TVs are GUI based, can you put them on core?
Good point. Most antivirus are GUI based. Can you even put them on core? The answer is it depends. Probably not, because it's not going to have the underlying infrastructure that needs to support that. But if they have a thin version that runs on core, then sure. But that depends on the individual. But the real question is, do I even need it? Well, think about what antivirus is doing. What's antivirus protecting you from?
Email. New stuff.
Email, web surfing, documents, all that stuff. Do you have any of that stuff on your hypervisor server? Are you ever going to have any of that stuff on your hypervisor server? Everybody say, never!
Never.
Or no, that's good enough. No is good. All right? No, you don't make file shares. You don't make your hypervisor server also a file server. Right? You just don't do that. Again, this goes back to keeping the parent secure. If you do want to run antivirus on it, by all means, run antivirus on it. Okay? But if you do, you want to check the documentation on the antivirus, because there's a good chance they're probably going to want you to disable the antivirus on some components on your hypervisor server. Some people, by policy, have to have antivirus on every single machine. Anybody in the room have that policy? They have to have antivirus on every single machine, every single server? It's policy, it's policy. You got to have it out there. Okay, well, you know, maybe you're the boss and can make exceptions to the rule. But if you can't, put antivirus on it. Just check the documentation and you know, go with whatever that particular antivirus manufacturer tells you to be files excluded. And there's actually a KB article that talks about some things that need to be in the exclusion range for your antivirus. So I've got a link to that. Yep.
You put it on and exclude everything.
There you go.
You got to be careful of a false positive. I had this week, or end of last week,
Yeah.
where the people I support have a lot of video files, so they're these huge monolithic things, and they kept coming up with viruses in one of them. And it's just a chance match to a definition file,
Yeah.
and they did the whole fire drill thing. Now we got a virus and everything.
Yeah, it happens.
So
False
you can have
positives
that
happen,
in your
absolutely.
VMs, I guess. If it's a big file, you got a good chance of getting a hit.
That's a great point, because what he was suggesting was those files were actually inside of a VM, which means they were inside of a guest, right? They weren't on the hypervisor host, but the host caught them probably through the VHD scan.
Be a false positive too, just
And a
the sheer
false
number of
positive.
bits in there, you have
Right.
a chance of.
Not only that, let me throw one other thing at you on do you need an antivirus? Where do you need the antivirus? On the guest, right?
Oh, yeah.
You also need it on the client. If you have it on the guest, that means that file, anytime it's opened or closed from a client, it gets scanned by the server, right? Well, theoretically, you have antivirus on the client, and the client, every time it's accessing a file, is scanning it too. So you already got it being scanned twice. Do you really need it scanned a third time? You don't. Okay, it's just overkill. So if you want to put it out there, put it out there. I'm not saying don't, but personally, I don't really see that it's necessary if you are running a secure environment. This one's obvious. Keep the parent up to date. You know, if there's patches out there, apply the patches. If you only have one host and you can't do live migration, well, if you only have one host, chances are you're not running 4 nines for your availability on it, right? Okay, it's just the way it is. So at some point you got to bring it down and do patches on that. But that's obvious, simple, it's important. Keep the parent domain. I knew I had a slide on that somewhere. Yeah.
Did you worry about patches with the core? Are there ever going to be updates?
Who can answer that? Are there ever updates to the core?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
Not as many.
Not as many.
Not as many.
Not nearly as many. Yeah. In fact, I can remember
What's the core?
2 off the top of my head since I've been at Microsoft. It doesn't mean it's only been 2, but I remember 2 specifically. Because whenever that happens, let me tell you, at Microsoft, it is a very big deal. It is a very, very, very big deal. And whenever that happens, thousands, tens of thousands of people have to get involved. It is a very, very big deal to patch a core. So yeah, Microsoft takes it very, very seriously, but it does happen.